Today, I am going to introduce a god-tier trick for LTX 2.3 that can effectively enhance your videos. Many of you might feel that the overall vibe of LTX 2.3 videos is a bit too flat and not eye-catching enough. Is there an effective way to boost the video quality? Today, we will teach you a highly effective method. This method is quite interesting, and using it feels a bit like opening a mystery box. That is to say, you might not be able to predict exactly which aspect of your video it will enhance beforehand. It could be the characters' movements, it might be the camera work, or it could even be the overall storytelling presentation. To test the effectiveness of this method, I tried different perspectives and different resolutions, and the results I got were all absolutely fantastic. So, what is this trick? It is actually very simple. We call it three-stage sampling. As we all know, in LTX 2.3, when we sample a video, we typically use a two-stage sampling process. The first stage is for generating the base video, and the second stage is for upscaling the video. So what exactly is three-stage sampling? Well, the first stage is still the base video generation, but we perform the upscaling process twice. This is what we call three-stage sampling. Once we have a basic understanding of this trick, you guys might have a lot of questions. First, will the sampling time increase? Second, can three-stage sampling really improve video quality effectively? And in what specific areas does it enhance the video? Let's first take a look at the workflow to make the demonstration easier. I have already deployed the testing workflow on Running Hub. In the ComfyUI space, Running Hub is a fantastic online cloud platform because whenever new models and technologies emerge, they are always the first to support them. Running Hub also provides an online community platform for ComfyUI creators where you can find tons of inspiration and testing workflows. Next, let's break down the core components of this workflow in detail. This workflow is essentially an LTX 2.3 image-to-video workflow. Of course, this three-stage sampling isn't just limited to image-to-video. It works perfectly for text-to-video as well. I am just using the image-to-video workflow as an example to explain it to you here. We have already covered all the specific details of this workflow in previous videos, so we will just do a quick recap here. You just need to remember that the core of this workflow is extending the two-stage sampling into a three-stage sampling process. First is loading the main model. The main model we are using here is still provided by Kijai. I need to remind you that Kijai's models are continuously being updated. When choosing your model, try your best to select his latest version. For example, for the LTX 2.3 main model here, I am using version 3. Second is processing the reference image. We highly recommend using standard aspect ratios like 3:4 or 9:16. Generally, we scale the reference image once. There is a fundamental rule here. We must ensure that its width and height are divisible by 32. Since this is an image-to-video workflow, the most crucial node here is the LTX image-to-video in place node. Its job is to convert our reference image into sampling conditions. Next up is the three-stage sampling. The first sampling stage is largely the same as the official sampling process provided by ComfyUI. It mainly generates a base video. The second stage is actually upscaling the result generated from the first stage within the latent space. For the upscale model, we are using the official one provided by LTX. Their model is also constantly releasing new versions, so you guys should try to use the latest version of the upscale model. And the third sampling stage is actually exactly the same as the second stage. There are a few key points we need to emphasize here. First is about the prompt. If you want to clearly see the difference between two-stage and three-stage sampling, the quality of your prompt needs to be as high as possible. Don't write it too broadly. You need to include detailed descriptions of character actions and camera movements. Second is the resolution setting within the workflow. If we use two-stage sampling, we typically set the resolution to 720 by 1280 or 960 by 1280. In the first stage, we have the width and height, then sample to generate the base video, and then perform a 2x upscale. This way, the final generated video matches the resolution we initially set. But for three-stage sampling, pay attention. If you use the same setting method, your graphics card probably won't be able to handle it. Therefore, we advise you to directly have that base resolution again. For instance, if you use 720 by 1280 in a two-stage sampling, then for the three-stage sampling, you should use 360 by 640. That way, after the second stage upscale, the video resolution we get is 360 by 640. Then, after going through the 2 times upscale in the third stage, we end up with a 720 by 1280 video. This ensures that the final generated video has the exact same resolution as the one obtained from the 2-stage sampling. Once we have a basic understanding of the workflow, we are going to thoroughly evaluate it from multiple dimensions. Here, I have designed 10 workflows. Note that these are 5 groups, with 2 in each group. In each group, one is the video generated using 2-stage sampling, and the other is the video effect generated using 3-stage sampling. During the generation process, we use the exact same prompt and the exact same seed to ensure their overall consistency as much as possible. Under these conditions, if we can see obvious differences in the videos, those differences will stem directly from the variance between 2-stage and 3-stage sampling. These 5 groups of tests respectively target different shot sizes, different resolutions, and the presentation of actions. All right, let's first look at the first example. In this workflow, the reference image we chose is an Eastern beauty, and we adopted a close-up facial perspective because this shot is quite close. We can clearly see all the various details on the beauty's face. You guys can also pay attention later to see if the facial skin details are effectively preserved after the final video is generated. In designing the prompt, our main focus was still on the expressions. We described her expression like this. She half squints her eyes with a slight flutter, then her gaze slowly shifts downwards, ultimately locking onto the camera. She displays a series of highly captivating micro-expressions. For instance, she bites her glossy lower lip with her teeth, then slowly releases it, and the corners of her mouth turn up into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. As for the camera, it slowly pushes forward with an extremely slow macro zoom. As you can see in this prompt, besides the expressions, we actually included camera movement designs as well. Overall, the actions are quite rich. Next, let's look at the generated results. Let's first check out the effect of the 2-stage sampling. In this example, you will notice that the preservation of her skin details is excellent. However, the presentation of the camera movement is quite poor. In the video from the 2-stage sampling, we can barely feel the camera moving at all. Now let's take a look at the generation result of the 3-stage sampling. The overall feel is quite similar to the 2-stage sampling. The character's facial expression is good, and the retention of skin details is roughly on par with the 2-stage version. However, the 3-stage sampling introduces slight camera movement, making the overall visual impact and storytelling feel a bit stronger. So here, I still need to remind you guys, when using the LTX 2.3 model, if you want the overall dynamic feel to be stronger, try to avoid using extremely close-up shots, which we commonly call macro or extreme close-up shots. Generating a video with them won't cause major issues, but you won't get any highly noticeable actions either. Just like the 3-stage result you are seeing now, the enhancement in the effect isn't particularly obvious. Next, let's look at the second testing workflow. In this workflow, we pulled the camera back a little bit further. The reference image uses an Eastern beauty lying on a bed with long hair, and her facial expression is quite rich. In our prompt, the designs for actions and camera movements are also quite extensive. Let's first look at the character's action design. She fluidly arches her back, slightly turns her body towards the camera, raises her left arm, lets her fingertips slowly glide through her hair, and finally rests her hand near her cheek. She tilts her chin up, exposing her neck, and then suddenly looks directly into the camera, lips slightly parted, bursting into a radiant smile. For the camera design, we emphasize that the camera moves with a dynamic, continuous handheld shake, gently pushing in and tilting downwards. As she constantly shifts her posture, the metallic gleam of her necklace remains clearly visible against the softly blurred bedsheets. Let's check out the final generated result. If we just look at the 2-stage generation, I think it is actually quite fantastic. Whether it is the character's actions or the camera's movements, they are presented very accurately in the video. But as the saying goes, comparison reveals the truth. So let's look at the effect generated by the 3-stage sampling. The character's actions are largely similar, but the camera movement is much richer, and it follows our prompt much better, possessing far more detail. Through these 2 tests, We can basically confirm that three-stage sampling can effectively enhance camera movement. In the third testing workflow, we pulled the perspective even further back. The reference image is an office beauty who accidentally dropped her documents on the floor. This picture captures the exact moment she bends over to pick up the files. This already has a very strong narrative feel. Next, let's look at the prompt design. She bends her knees, reaches out a hand, and deliberately picks up the beige folder dropped on the floor. She suddenly stops her squatting motion, arches her back slightly, abruptly lifts her chin, stares firmly into the camera, parts her lips slightly, and lets out a long exhale. The camera uses a dynamic handheld push-in shot, smoothly tilting upwards from the edges of the papers scattered on the wooden floor, ultimately focusing on her face. Let's look at the final generated result. We will find that the main difference between two-stage and three-stage sampling is still in the camera presentation. It is very obvious that the three-stage sampling pushes the camera in much closer and with a much larger amplitude, whereas the two-stage sampling is not as pronounced. Additionally, in the three-stage sampling, the depiction of the character's facial expressions is also a bit more exaggerated. Many of you might have noticed that all the images we tested earlier were vertical. Next, let's test a horizontal one. This is a standard 16:9 horizontal image. It features an Eastern beauty lazily leaning back in a chair. The sunlight shining in through the window makes this lazy vibe even more pronounced. Let's look at the prompt design. The beauty grips the carved wooden armrests of the chair tightly, suddenly leans her body forward, and looks straight into the camera. She deliberately leans forward while stretching her right shoulder back. The camera, with a dynamic, smooth push and a subtle upward tilt, passes through the warm sunbeams to track her sudden forward movement. Let's check the final generated result. I feel that the horizontal effect is actually better than the vertical one, and this time, the quality improvement from the three-stage sampling is not in the camera movement, but rather in the character's actions. You will notice that in the three-stage sampling, the character's action amplitude is much larger, the content is richer, and the overall fluidity is also much better. Finally, let's test a rather interesting perspective, a low-angle shot. In the reference image, a beauty is walking down the stairs, and we captured this moment from a low-angle perspective. Let's look at the prompt design. She stops walking, elegantly stands at the edge of the steps, abruptly turns around, and faces her body toward the camera. She playfully flips her thick long hair over one shoulder while slightly lowering her head. As for the camera design, we didn't include too much description. Let's look at the final generated result. This one is really hard to compare and say which one is objectively better because their overall presentation focuses on different things. The two-stage sampling focuses more on the depiction of the character's face. As for the three-stage sampling, you will find that the camera ultimately focuses on her legs, but we didn't even describe it that way in the prompt. So in this specific comparison, I think the effects presented by both sampling methods are actually quite good. After running all these tests, you will realize that overall, the three-stage sampling yields better results than the two-stage method. But that isn't even the best part. So what is the best part? When we use the three-stage sampling workflow, the total generation time is almost identical to the two-stage method. Some of you might ask, why is that? Didn't you add an extra upscale stage? But don't forget, in the first stage, we lowered the base resolution. Because these two factors offset each other, the computational cost of both workflows ends up being pretty much the same. In other words, we spend the exact same amount of time but get a much better looking video. Therefore, I highly recommend you guys test it out for yourselves. All right, that is all for today. Follow me to become someone who truly understands AI.